She couldn't walk after that night. But the mafia boss said, "Now you'll never run again." The rain in Harborview did not wash things clean. It only slicked the grime of the city into a darker shade of gray, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the neon pawnshop signs and the flashing blue lights of police cruisers. Maya Torres pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the number 42 bus. Watching the city blur past, she was 25 years old, but her bones felt twice that age. Her reflection in the window was a ghost, pale and tired, with dark curls pulled back into a messy knot that had started the day neat. She shifted her weight, wincing as a dull ache throbbed in her lower back. Her shift at the physical therapy clinic had ended 40 minutes ago, but the work never really stopped. It just changed venues. By day, she was the encouraging voice, the steady hand, the one who told stroke victims and car crash survivors that pain was just a signal, not a stop sign. By night, she poured drinks for men who looked at her like she was on the menu, trying to make enough rent to keep her small apartment in a neighborhood where the sound of gunshots was as common as the weather report. The bus lurched to a halt, the brakes screeching like a dying animal. Maya grabbed her tote bag and stepped out into the drizzle. She pulled her coat tighter, ducking her head against the wind. The memory of the afternoon lingered in her mind. She had spent an hour with Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old woman recovering from a hip replacement. The woman had wanted to quit, tears streaming down her face, insisting it hurt too much to stand. Maya had knelt beside her, holding the woman's trembling hands. "Movement is freedom, Mrs. Gable," she had said, her voice soft but unyielding. "If you stop moving, the world shrinks. We have to keep the world big. Movement is freedom." Maya repeated the mantra to herself as she walked quickly toward the Sapphire Room, the upscale nightclub where she worked her second shift. It was a cruel irony that she spent her days helping people learn to stand and her nights serving poison that made them stumble. But she needed the money. She always needed the money. She entered the club through the back alley staff door, greeted by the heavy thump of bass that vibrated in her chest. The air inside already smelled of expensive perfume, sweat, and spilled gin. Maya clocked in, swapped her sensible clinic shoes for black boots, and tied her apron around her waist. She checked her reflection in the cracked mirror of the employee locker room. Her eyes were hard. They had been hard since she was 12 years old. The year her father had been walking home from the grocery store and caught a stray bullet from a drive-by shooting intended for a local dealer. He had died on the pavement a block from their house. The police called it collateral damage. Maya called it murder. Since then, she had harbored a cold, burning hatred for everything the Harborview underworld represented, the suits, the cars, the money. It was all blood. She pushed through the swinging doors and took her place behind the long, polished mahogany bar. The night started slow, but by 11 o'clock the club was packed. The noise was a physical weight. Maya moved on autopilot, mixing drinks with practiced efficiency, her mind drifting to the anatomy textbook waiting on her bedside table. Then, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, it was a silence that rippled outward from the front entrance, cutting through the chatter like a knife. Even the DJ seemed to lower the volume instinctively. Maya looked up from a half-poured martini. A group of men had walked in. They moved in a wedge formation, dark suits tailored to perfection, eyes scanning the room with predatory alertness. In the center of the formation walked a man who made the others look like children playing dress-up, Luca Marino. Maya's grip on the shaker tightened until her knuckles turned white. She recognized him instantly from the news reports and the whispered gossip of her customers. The head of the Marino Syndicate, the man who effectively ran half of Harborview. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against a charcoal suit. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was too sharp, too handsome for a man with that much blood on his hands. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a CEO or a senator, except for the eyes. Even from across the room, his gaze was heavy, sweeping over the crowd with a bored, lethal indifference. I hate you, she thought, the venom sudden and sharp in her throat. You and everyone like you. Luca moved toward the VIP section, his entourage clearing a path without having to touch anyone. People stepped aside, a mixture of fear and awe on their faces. It made Maya sick. They treated him like royalty when he was nothing more than a wolf in Italian silk. The night wore on. The tension in the room remained high, buzzing with the electricity that always accompanied Luca Marino's presence. Maya tried to ignore the VIP section, focusing on her customers, but her nerves were frayed. Hey, sweetheart, pour me another one. A heavy hand landed on her wrist. Maya stiffened. She looked up to see a man in a rumpled suit. His tie loosened, his face flushed with too much bourbon. He was leering at her, his grip wet and clammy. Let go, Maya said. Her voice was flat. The man laughed, leaning over the bar. His breath smelled sour. Come on, don't be like that. You have been ignoring me all night. I just want a drink and a smile. I cut you off 20 minutes ago, Maya said, yanking her arm back. Her skin crawled where he had touched her. And I am not paid to smile at you. I am paid to pour drinks. You are done. Leave. The man's expression darkened. He slammed his hand on the bar, rattling the glassware. Do you know who I am? You stupid little... I do not care who you are, Maya interrupted, her voice rising above the music. But I know who the bouncers are, and I know who the cops are. Walk away, or I make the call. The man lunged, grabbing for her apron strings, before Maya could grab the bottle of vodka she intended to use as a weapon. A shadow fell over the bar. She expected one of the bouncers. Instead, she saw Luca Marino watching from the edge of the VIP railing, 10 feet away. He wasn't intervening. He was just watching. He held a glass of amber liquid in one hand, his body relaxed, but his eyes were locked on her. He looked curious, amused, even as if he were watching a nature documentary. The injustice of it sparked a fire in her chest. She didn't need a savior, and she certainly didn't need an audience. Maya stared right back at Luca, holding his gaze with a defiant glare, before turning back to the drunk. She picked up the bar phone and held the receiver up like a weapon. Last chance. She warned the drunk. The man looked at her, then looked at where Luca was standing. He seemed to shrink. He muttered a curse, stumbled back, and disappeared into the crowd. Maya slammed the phone down. She looked back at the VIP rail. Luca raised his glass to her, a faint, mocking salute. Maya turned her back on him and started scrubbing a perfectly clean section of the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs. An hour later, the fragile piece of the night shattered. It started near the entrance. A shout, the crash of breaking glass, and then the distinct, terrifying pop of a handgun. The music cut out instantly. Screams erupted. The crowd surged like a panic-stricken tide, knocking over tables and stools. Maya ducked behind the bar, her hands over her head, old instincts kicking in. Get low, stay covered. More shots rang out. It wasn't a massacre, it was a skirmish, a rival crew, maybe the Vegas, making a statement. The exchange lasted less than 20 seconds, but in the echo of the gunfire, the silence that followed was deafening. Is it over? The other bartender whispered, curled into a ball beside the ice bin. Maya didn't answer. She peeked over the rim of the bar. The attackers had fled. Police sirens were already wailing in the distance, growing louder by the second. Near the entrance to the kitchen, a knot of men in dark suits were clustered around someone. She saw the familiar charcoal suit. Luca Marino. He was leaning against the wall, one hand pressed to his side. His face was pale, his teeth clenched, but he was standing. His men were shouting into phones, guns drawn, looking for threats that had already vanished. Maya should have stayed hidden. She should have waited for the police, but she saw the dark stains spreading rapidly across the white shirt beneath Luca's jacket. She saw the way his knees buckled slightly. Damn it, she hissed. She didn't think. She just moved. Movement is freedom. Or in this case, movement was stupidity. She grabbed a stack of clean bar towels and vaulted over the counter. She pushed through the confused crowd and marched straight up to the circle of armed men. Back off, one of the bodyguards shouted, leveling a gun at her chest. Put that away, you idiot, Maya snapped, not breaking stride. He's bleeding out while you are playing soldier. I have medical training. Move." The authority in her voice, honed by years of commanding stubborn patience, made the guard hesitate. Maya pushed past the gun and reached Luca. He looked at her, his eyes hazy with pain but still sharp with recognition. "You," he rasped, the bartender with the temper. "Shut up," Maya said. She hooked her arm around his waist, taking his weight. "You cannot stay here. The cops are 2 minutes away. If you are here when they arrive, you go to jail or the hospital, and I am guessing you want neither." Luca let out a dark, strained laugh. "Smart girl, back room." Maya ordered the guards. "Now." She dragged the most feared man in Harborview through the kitchen doors and into the manager's cramped office. She kicked the door shut and shoved Luca into the desk chair. "Let me see," she commanded. She didn't wait for permission. She pushed his hands aside. His palms were slick with red. Maya gritted her teeth, fighting the nausea that always rose at the sight of violence, and ripped his shirt open. Buttons scattered across the floor. The bullet had grazed his side, just above the hip bone. It was a jagged, ugly tear, bleeding heavily, but it hadn't hit an organ. "You are lucky," she muttered, grabbing a bottle of vodka from the manager's stash and unscrewing the cap. "This is going to burn." "Do it," Luca said. She poured the alcohol over the wound. Luca's body jerked, his muscles seizing, a hiss of air escaping through his teeth. He didn't scream. He didn't even close his eyes. He just stared at her. Maya pressed the thick wad of bar towels against the wound and leaned her weight into it. "Hold this," she ordered, grabbing his hand and forcing it onto the towel. "Push hard. Do not let up." She grabbed a roll of duct tape from the desk drawer. The manager kept it for quick repairs. And more towels. She worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She packed the wound tight and wrapped the tape around his waist to hold the pressure, moving with the efficiency of the trauma drills she had practiced 100 times. The room was small, smelling of old paper, cheap vodka, and the metallic tang of blood. The sirens were loud now. Right outside the club, blue and red lights flashed through the high, barred window, strobing across Luca's face. Maya finished the makeshift bandage and stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. Her breathing was ragged. "You will need stitches," she said, her voice trembling slightly now that the immediate crisis was over. "But the bleeding has slowed." Luca sat slumped in the chair, his chest heaving. He looked at the bandage, then up at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. He wasn't looking at her like a bartender anymore. He was looking at her like she was a riddle he hadn't expected to find. "You have steady hands," he said softly. "I work in physical therapy," Maya said, her voice clipped. "I fix broken things. I do not usually patch up criminals." Luca smirked, though it looked pained. "Everyone is a criminal in Harborview." "Maya." "Some of us are just more honest about it. Don't use my name," she snapped. "I don't want you knowing my name." "You are wearing a name tag," he pointed out. Maya ripped the plastic tag off her apron and threw it on the desk. "Just get out. The back exit leads to the alley. Your car can pick you up a block over." The door to the office burst open. Luca's head of security, a giant of a man named Rico, filled the frame. "Boss, we gotta move. Cops are coming in the front." Luca nodded. He stood up, wincing, but buttoned his ruined jacket to hide the blood. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was creamy white paper, bulging with cash. He tossed it onto the desk in front of Maya. "For your trouble," he said. Maya stared at the envelope. She knew how much was in there. Probably more than she made in 6 months. It could fix her mother's roof. It could pay off her student loans. She grabbed the envelope and shoved it hard against his chest. "I do not want your money," she said, her voice shaking with a sudden, overwhelming anger. "I do not want anything from you. I just want you and your people to stop bringing guns into my workplace. Stop bleeding on my floor. Just leave." Luca looked down at the envelope against his chest, then back at her face. He didn't look angry at the rejection. He looked impressed. The smirk faded, replaced by something more intense, something that made the hair on Maya's arm stand up. "Most people take the money," he said. "I am not most people," she hissed. Luca paused. The sounds of police radios echoed in the hallway. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of smoke and blood and something dangerously expensive. "No," he said, his voice low, a rumble in his chest. "You are not—" He took the envelope back, tucking it into his pocket. He didn't break eye contact. "See you around, Maya." Then he was gone, slipping out the back door with his men just as the police banged on the office door. Maya stood alone in the center of the room, her hands covered in the blood of a man she despised. She rushed to the small sink in the corner and scrubbed her skin until it was raw, the water turning pink and swirling down the drain. She felt cold. A deep, shivering chill settled into her bones. She'd saved him. She hated him, and she had saved him. And the way he had looked at her, it wasn't the look of a man who was grateful. It was the look of a man who had found something he wanted to keep. The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed rain. Maya dragged herself to the clinic, her body aching from lack of sleep. She had spent half the night giving statements to the police, carefully omitting the part where she played nursemaid to the city's crime lord. She changed into her scrubs and started her rounds. She was working on Mrs. Gable's knee flexion when the receptionist, a young girl named Sarah, poked her head into the therapy room. "Maya?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "There are 2 men outside to see you." Maya froze. "Is it the police again?" "No," Sarah said, swallowing hard. They are in suits. Black SUVs. They said they are waiting." Maya's stomach dropped. She walked to the window and looked out. Parked at the curb, blocking the loading zone, was a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows. 2 men stood beside it, hands clasped in front of them, looking like statues carved from granite. They weren't police. Maya excused herself, apologizing to Mrs. Gable, and walked out the front door. The morning air was cold. She marched up to the men, crossing her arms over her chest. "You cannot park here," she said. "This is a medical facility." The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. He had a scar running through his eyebrow. "Miss Torres, Mr. Marino would like to thank you properly for your assistance last night." "I told him I didn't want his money," Maya said, her voice tight. The man didn't blink. "It is not about the money. He would like to speak with you. Tonight, the Velvet Room, after hours. I am busy." Maya lied. The man opened the back door of the SUV, not to let her in, but to show her that he wasn't asking. He closed it gently. "Mr. Marino is not a man who enjoys being in debt. Miss Torres, he insists. We will pick you up at midnight. It wasn't a question, it was a summons." Maya looked at the man, then at the busy street. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But she thought of the clinic behind her, filled with vulnerable patients. She thought of her mother alone in her house. She realized with a sinking dread that she had crossed a line the night before. She had touched the spider's web, and now the spider was coming down to investigate the vibration. "I will get there myself," Maya said, lifting her chin. The man studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Midnight. Don't be late." They got into the car and drove away, slipping seamlessly into the Harborview traffic. Maya stood on the sidewalk watching them go. She felt the phantom warmth of Luca's blood on her hands again, a stain that no amount of scrubbing could wash away. She had told Mrs. Gable that movement was freedom, but as she turned back to the clinic, Maya Torres felt the distinct, suffocating sensation of a trap snapping shut. The Sapphire Room looked different in the silence of closing hours, without the thumping bass, the crushing crowds, and the haze of artificial smoke. It felt like an abandoned cathedral dedicated to sins that everyone had gone home to sleep off. Maya Torres stood at the entrance of the VIP lounge, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her coat, clutching her keys like a makeshift weapon. She had spent the last 3 hours rehearsing exactly what she was going to say. She had a list of sharp, cutting remarks filed away in her mind, ammunition designed to pierce the ego of a man who thought the world owed him a bow. She would tell him to stay away from her clinic. She would tell him that his money was dirty paper and she would sooner burn it than spend it. She would tell him that she was not afraid of him, even if her heart was currently hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs that suggested otherwise. She stepped into the lounge. Luca Marino was waiting. He sat on a velvet sofa the color of midnight, one leg crossed over the other, looking infuriatingly at ease. There was no entourage tonight, no wall of muscle-bound guards named Rico or Tony standing between him and the world. It was just him. A crystal tumbler of sparkling water on the low table in front of him, and the low hum of the ventilation system. He looked up as she approached. He had changed his suit from the night before. This one was navy blue, cut sharp enough to draw blood, fitting his broad shoulders with a precision that spoke of Italian tailors and excessive wealth. He did not look like a man who had been shot 24 hours ago, though Maya noticed he moved with a slight stiffness as he stood to greet her. "You came," Luca said. His voice was deep, scraping against the silence of the room. "I was told I did not have a choice," Maya replied, her voice steady. "Your goons made that very clear." "Associates," Luca corrected gently. "And you always have a choice. Maya, I just wanted to ensure you made the one that allowed me to thank you." He gestured to the empty seat across from him. Maya did not sit. She remained standing, a sentinel of moral outrage in her worn denim jacket and scuffed boots, refusing to sink into the plush luxury of his world. "I do not want your thanks," she said. "I told you that last night. I patched you up because I took an oath to help people, even the ones who do not deserve it. It was a reflex, not a favor." Luca studied her face, his dark eyes tracing the line of her jaw, the defiant set of her mouth. He seemed fascinated by her resistance, as if she were a rare species of bird he had never encountered in the wild. "Please, sit," he said. "Just for a moment. I promise I am not armed." Maya hesitated, then sat on the very edge of the armchair, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. "So," Luca began, leaning back and resting his hands on his knees, "tell me about yourself. The real you. Not the bartender who throws drunk men out, and not the medic who stitches up gunshot wounds with duct tape. Who is Maya Torres? I am nobody," she snapped. "I work, I sleep, I pay my bills." "You work 2 jobs, Luca noted. "That is admirable. And you have a mother in the East End?" Maya went cold. "Do not talk about my mother." "If you or your people go near her—" "I am just making conversation," Luca interrupted, raising a hand in a peace gesture. "I like to know who I am dealing with. I know you are hardworking, I know you are angry. And I know you hate men like me." "You have no idea," Maya said, the bitterness rising in her throat like bile. "Try me," Luca challenged softly. Maya looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome, undeniably so, with that dangerous, broken charm that drew people in like moths to a flame. But she saw past the suit and the eyes. She saw the violence that underpinned his existence. "My father was walking home from the grocery store 10 years ago," Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "He was a teacher. He never hurt anyone. He was just walking on the sidewalk, carrying a bag of oranges." Luca went still. His expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to grow heavier. 2 cars came speeding down the street. Maya continued, her eyes burning. "One of your rival crews. Maybe it was the Vegas. Maybe it was the syndicate. It does not matter. They started shooting at each other. They did not care who was on the street. A stray bullet hit my father in the chest. He died before the ambulance arrived. The oranges rolled into the gutter." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing him. "That is what your world does, Mr. Marino. It turns good men into collateral damage and daughters into orphans. So do not sit there in your expensive suit and ask me about my life. Your world killed the best part of it." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Luca looked down at his glass of water. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not apologize for a crime he hadn't personally committed, knowing it would sound hollow. "I cannot change the past," Luca said finally, looking up. His voice was devoid of its earlier charm, replaced by a somber gravity. "And I will not insult you by saying I am sorry, because sorry does not bring dead men back. But I can ensure that the future is different." "I don't need your protection," Maya said, standing up abruptly. I just need you to stay away from me." She turned and walked toward the exit. She expected him to stop her, to call out, to demand she stay. But he remained silent. As she pushed through the heavy doors and out into the cool night air, she felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. He hadn't fought for her attention. He had just let her go. The street outside was quiet. The fog had rolled in off the harbor, dampening the streetlights into hazy orange orbs. Maya wrapped her coat tighter around herself and started walking. She lived 6 blocks away, a distance she walked every night, usually. She was vigilant, keys between her fingers, eyes scanning the shadows. But tonight, her mind was clouded with the image of Luca's face when she had mentioned her father. The flicker of something human behind the monster's mask. She shook her head, angry at herself. "Do not humanize him," she scolded herself. "That is how they get you." She turned the corner onto 4th Street, a crumbling stretch of road lined with boarded-up storefronts and overflowing dumpsters. It was the border between Merino territory and Vega turf, a no-man's land that locals knew to cross quickly. A car engine revved behind her. Maya stiffened, expecting a catcall or a drunk driver. She kept her head down and quickened her pace. The sound of tires screeching against asphalt tore through the quiet. Then came the shouting. "Vega!" Someone screamed. The air shattered. Pop, 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 pop. Gunfire. Close. Deafening. Maya threw herself to the ground instinctively, scrambling behind a concrete planter as bullets chipped away at the brick wall above her head. Dust and debris rained down on her hair. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She curled into a ball, covering her ears, the scream dying in her throat. A black sedan roared around the corner, weaving erratically. Another car was chasing it, muzzle flashes lighting up the fog like strobe lights from hell. It was a war zone. Suddenly, a third car screeched to a halt right in front of her hiding spot. The tires smoked, the smell of burning rubber choking the air. The back door flew open. "Get in!" a voice roared. Maya looked up. Luca was leaning out of the back seat of a massive armored SUV, his hand outstretched. His face was a mask of terrified fury. "Maya, get in the car, now!" Another bullet ricocheted off the pavement inches from her boot. The choice was simple. The sidewalk or the devil? Maya lunged. She grabbed Luca's hand. He possessed a strength that was terrifying, yanking her off the ground and into the vehicle in one fluid motion. He dragged her across the leather seat, pulling her down low as the driver floored the accelerator. "Stay down!" Luca barked, pressing his hand to the back of her head, forcing her face into the leather upholstery. The car swerved violently, speeding away from the gunfire. Maya could hear the dull thuds of bullets impacting the rear of the vehicle, but they didn't penetrate. Bulletproof glass, reinforced steel, a tank disguised as a luxury car. Maya was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She was sprawled across the back seat, tangled with Luca. His body was crowding hers, shielding her from the window. He was heavy, solid, a wall of heat and muscle pressing her down. She could feel the rapid, heavy thud of his heart against her shoulder. It was beating just as fast as hers. He wasn't calm. He was terrified. Not for himself, she realized with a jolt, but for her. "Are you hit?" Luca demanded, his voice rough. He pulled back slightly, his hands roaming over her arms and shoulders, checking for blood. "Maya, look at me." "Are you hit?" "No," she gasped, pushing herself up to a sitting position, though he kept a protective arm around her shoulders. I am okay." Luca let out a breath that sounded like a curse. He slammed his hand against the partition separating them from the driver. "Get us out of here. Marco, take the side streets. Lose them." He turned back to Maya. His eyes were wild, the pupils blown wide with adrenaline. "You idiot," he growled, though there was no malice in it, only frantic relief. "I told you walking home was dangerous. I have walked that way 1,000 times, Maya shouted back, the fear turning into adrenaline-fueled anger. "I didn't ask for a war to start on my sidewalk." "It is not a war," Luca said grimly, straightening his jacket but keeping his hand on the back of the seat, inches from her neck. It was a message. And you were in the middle of it. The car slowed as they reached a safer neighborhood, the streetlights becoming steady and rhythmic again. The silence inside the cabin was heavy, charged with the scent of gunpowder and Luca's cologne, sandalwood and something sharper, like ozone. "Why were you there?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Were you following me?" "I was making sure you got home," Luca said, looking out the window, his jaw tight. "Turns out, it is a good thing I was." Maya slumped back against the seat. She felt nauseous. The reality of what had just happened was crashing down on her. She'd almost died. Again. "Why?" she whispered. "Why is this happening?" Luca turned to look at her. The streetlights washed his face in passing stripes of light and shadow. "Because the Vegas saw you with me last night," he said. "They saw you save my life. In their eyes. That makes you an associate. It makes you a target." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. No, I am not part of this. I told you. I want nothing to do with you. It does not matter what you want." "Maya," Luca said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "In Harborview, perception is reality. They think you are mine, which means they will try to hurt you to get to me." Maya stared at him, horror dawning. She was trapped. She had stitched a wound and sealed her fate. "I am going to die," she whispered. "No," Luca said. The word was a vow, hard and unbreakable. He reached out and took her chin in his hand, forcing her to look at him. "You are not going to die. I will not let anything happen to you." He leaned forward, tapping on the glass. "Turn around, Marco. Go back to the club." "No," Maya protested. "I want to go home." "You are shaking," Luca said. "You are in shock. I am not dropping you off at an empty apartment so you can sit in the dark and replay this until you scream. We're going to go somewhere safe, just for an hour, until you can breathe again." Maya wanted to argue, but her hands were trembling so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap to stop it. She nodded, defeated. They returned to the Sapphire Room. The club was truly empty now, the staff gone, the doors locked. It felt like a bunker, a very expensive, velvet-lined bunker. Luca led her to a booth in the corner, away from the windows. He didn't offer her alcohol this time. He went behind the bar himself and returned with a glass of ice water and a cold towel. "Put this on your neck," he instructed, handing her the towel. "It helps with the shock." Maya obeyed, the cold dampness grounding her. She took a sip of water, watching Luca. He was pacing slightly, checking his phone, barking silent orders via text. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield, but every time his eyes flicked to her, the hardness softened just a fraction. He walked over to the DJ booth, which was silent. He pressed a few buttons. A moment later, music filled the empty room. It wasn't the pounding techno of the night before. It was a slow, soulful jazz track, the saxophone weeping low and melodious. Luca walked back to her. He stood in front of the booth, looking down at her. He extended a hand. "Dance with me," he said. Maya stared at his hand. It was large, scarred at the knuckles, but steady. "Are you insane?" she asked, her voice cracking. "We just got shot at. I am not dancing." "You need to get out of your head," Luca said. "You are sitting there thinking about bullets and concrete. You need to be here, in this room, right now. You need to move. Movement is freedom." The words echoed in her mind, her own philosophy turned against her. "I do not dance with criminals," Maya said, clutching her water glass. Luca stepped closer. He lowered his voice, dropping it to a register that vibrated in the floorboards. "Just a dance. Maya. Nothing more. No crime, no politics, no past, just a song." He didn't pull her up. He just waited, his hand hovering, offering her a choice in a night where all her choices had been stripped away. Maya looked at his hand. She looked at the scar on his wrist. She looked at his eyes, which were pleading with her in a way she didn't think a man like him was capable of. Slowly, hesitantly, she set the glass down. She reached out and placed her palm in his. His grip was warm and dry. He pulled her up gently, as if she were made of glass. He led her to the center of the empty dance floor, beneath the slowly rotating colored lights that painted them in shades of azure and violet. He placed one hand on her waist. His touch was tentative, respectful, leaving inches of space between their bodies. Maya raised her hand to his shoulder, feeling the tension in the muscles beneath the expensive wool of his jacket. They began to sway, At first, Maya was stiff, her body rigid with resistance. But the music was hypnotic, and Luca was a surprisingly good dancer. He moved with a fluid grace that belied his size. He led her effortlessly, anticipating her movements before she even made them. "Relax," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "I have you." Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her shoulders dropped. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. Luca's thumb began to move. It brushed against the side of her hand, back and forth, in tiny, almost reverent circles. It was a small gesture, intimate and soothing, and it sent a jolt of electricity straight up her arm. She looked up at him. He was watching her with an intensity that made the rest of the world fall away. The empty club, the gangsters, the shooting, it all faded into the background. There was only the rhythm, the warmth of his hand on her waist, and the dark gravity of his eyes. For a moment, she forgot that he was the monster under the bed. He was just a man who had saved her life, a man who was holding her as if she were the most precious thing in a city full of trash. They turned in a slow circle. The song swelled, the saxophone climbing to a crescendo. Maya's body betrayed her. She leaned into him, her head tilting back slightly, her lips parting. Luca's gaze dropped to her mouth. His eyes darkened. The thumb on her hand stopped moving, his grip tightening imperceptibly on her waist. He leaned in, his head tilting down, drawn by a magnetic force neither of them could control. Maya felt the heat radiating from him. She could smell the soap on his skin, taste the anticipation in the air. She wanted it. God help her. In that moment, she wanted him to kiss her, to erase the fear of the night with something primal and alive. His lips were inches from hers. She could feel the ghost of his breath. Then the memory of her father's face flashed in her mind, the oranges in the gutter, the blood on the pavement. No, Maya pulled back, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. She stumbled a step away from him, breaking the contact. "I cannot," she said, her voice breathless and wild. Luca stopped instantly. He didn't reach for her again. He stood there, his hands falling to his sides, his chest heaving slightly. Maya backed away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I am not one of your club girls. Luca, I am not something you can buy with safety or charm. I will not be owned by your money or your world." Luca ran a hand through his hair, a flash of frustration crossing his face. It was quick, sharp, but he clamped down on it. He looked at her, and the vulnerability was gone, replaced by the iron mask of the boss. "It was not about owning you." "Maya," he said quietly. He walked over to the bar and picked up his keys. "Come on, I will have Marco drive you home, and he will sit outside your building all night. I do not need—" Maya started. "Yes, you do." Luca cut her off. His voice was hard again. Brooking no argument, he walked back to her, stopping just outside of touching distance. "You pulled away. Maya, that is fine. You are right to hate me. You are right to want to run. But understand this. Walking home alone is a luxury you can no longer afford. The world has changed for you tonight. You can hate me all you want, but you will let me keep you alive." He held the door open for her. "After you." Maya walked past him, feeling the heat of his body as she brushed by. She walked out into the cold night, safe but terrified, knowing that he was right. She hadn't just danced with the devil, she had let him lead, and now she didn't know how to stop the music. The phone in Maya's pocket buzzed like an angry hornet. She ignored it at first, keeping her eyes fixed on the grimy floor of the number 12 bus. The vehicle rattled over the potholes of Harborview's industrial district, the suspension groaning with every impact. It was a sound Maya used to find comforting, the rhythm of the city's working class. But now, every noise made her flinch. She glanced out the window. It was there again. A black sedan, nondescript and tinted, sat 2 car lengths behind the bus. It had been there when she left her apartment. It had idled at the corner while she grabbed coffee. And now, 20 minutes later, it was still there, shadowing her like a shark trailing a wounded seal. The phone buzzed again. A long, insistent vibration. Maya pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the screen, her pulse quickening. She opened the message. "We know you were with Marino. People close to him don't live long." A cold chill washed over her, freezing the breath in her lungs. She stared at the words, the glowing pixels burning into her retinas. They knew. The Vega crew, or whoever was hunting Luca, knew she had been in his car. They knew she had touched him. She got off the bus 3 stops early, doubling back through a crowded market, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't go home. She went straight to the clinic, the only place that still felt like neutral ground, but when she arrived, she found that neutrality had been revoked. 2 men in dark suits were standing by the reception desk. They weren't threatening anyone, but their sheer size and the way they watched the door made the patients in the waiting room nervous. Maya recognized one of them, Rico, Luca's lieutenant. "Get out," Maya hissed, marching up to him. She shoved her phone into his chest. "Look at this. Look at what your boss has brought to my doorstep." Rico glanced at the screen, his expression unreadable. He tapped his earpiece. "We need to move. I am not going anywhere with you," Maya snapped, her voice rising. "You are scaring my patients. Leave. The boss says—" Rico started. "I don't care what the boss says," Maya shouted. "Tell him to keep his chaos away from me." The argument was cut short by a sound that shattered the morning routine, a deafening crash of glass. Maya screamed as the front window of the clinic exploded inward. Shards of glass sprayed across the waiting room floor like diamond hail. Mrs. Gable, who had been sitting near the magazines, covered her head and shrieked. Silence followed. Heavy and terrified, on the floor, amidst the glittering debris, lay a red brick. Wrapped around it with a rubber band was a piece of paper marked with a crude, black spray-painted symbol, a V with a line through it, the mark of the Vega crew. Maya stood frozen, staring at the brick. It had landed 3 feet from where a stroke patient was sitting. 3 feet. Rico was already moving, barking orders into his radio, his gun drawn but held low. "Secure the perimeter. Get the car around back." Maya looked at Mrs. Gable, who was shaking but unharmed. She looked at the terrified receptionist. Then she looked at the brick. The message was clear. The clinic wasn't neutral anymore. Nowhere was... 2 hours later, Maya sat in the back of Luca's armored SUV, a duffel bag at her feet. She had sent the staff home. She had called a contractor to board up the window. And then, with a bitterness that tasted like ash in her mouth, she had agreed to go with Rico. The car didn't take her to the club. It took her to the skyline. The penthouse was located in the glimmering Spire district, a world away from the cracked pavement of her neighborhood. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, revealing a space that looked more like a museum than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the same city that was trying to kill her. But from this height, the grime looked like glitter. Luca was waiting for her in the center of the living room. He looked tired. He had shed his jacket. His tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal powerful forearms. "Are you hurt?" was the first thing he asked. He didn't say hello. He just scanned her body for damage. "No thanks to you," Maya replied. Stepping out of the elevator, she didn't drop her bag. She held onto it like a shield. A brick came through the window. Luca. It almost hit Mrs. Gable. "I know," Luca said, his voice low. "I have men stationed at the clinic now. Repairs are already being paid for, and the man who threw it will be found before the sun sets." "I do not want your revenge," Maya said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I want my life back." "You cannot have your old life back," Luca said, brutal in his honesty. "Not right now. The Vegas have marked you. Until I end this. You stay here." Maya looked around the room. The furniture was sleek, modern Italian leather, chrome and glass. It was cold, impersonal. "I am not your property." "Luca," she said, meeting his eyes. "I am not one of your collectibles to be stored on a shelf until the danger passes. I go to work. I pay my own way. I sleep where I want." "You sleep here," Luca corrected, "because if you sleep out there, you die. And I am not going to let that happen." He stepped closer. The scent of him, sandalwood and something uniquely male, invading her personal space. It was the same scent that lingered in the hallway, a smell that was becoming alarmingly familiar. "There are 2 bedrooms," he said, gesturing down the hall. "The master is mine. The guest suite is yours. It has a lock. You have the only key." Maya hesitated. The lock was a concession, a peace offering. "I will sleep on the couch," she said stubbornly. "I do not want to get comfortable in your guest suite." Luca looked at the couch, a low, angular piece of designer furniture that looked about as comfortable as a park bench. He raised an eyebrow. "Suit yourself." He turned and walked toward his office, closing the door. Maya unpacked her meager belongings in the living room, feeling small in the cavernous space. She curled up on the couch that night, wrapping herself in a blanket she had brought from home. It was miserable. The leather was stiff, the angle hurt her back, and the city lights were too bright. She fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of shattering glass and car tires screeching on asphalt. When she woke the next morning, her back was stiff. She dragged herself to the kitchen to make coffee, avoiding Luca, who had already left for the day. When she returned to the living room that evening after a shift at the clinic, driven there and back by Rico, she stopped dead in her tracks. The angular designer couch was gone. In its place sat a massive, overstuffed plush sofa in a soft charcoal gray. It looked like a cloud that had been anchored to the floor. On the armrest was a note, written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Movement is freedom. Back pain is not." L. Maya stared at the note. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to resent him for using his money to solve a problem she had created out of spite. But as she sank into the cushions, feeling the softness envelop her aching muscles, she felt a treacherous warmth bloom in her chest. He had noticed. He had listened. And in his own twisted, controlling way, he had tried to care for her. Living with Luca Marino was like living with a ghost who occasionally raided the fridge. For the first 3 days, they barely saw each other. He left before she woke and returned after she was asleep. The apartment was a silent fortress, but on the 4th night, the rhythm changed. Maya couldn't sleep. The silence of the high-rise was unnerving compared to the noise of her old neighborhood. At 2 a.m, she wandered into the kitchen, wearing an oversized vintage t-shirt that hung to her mid-thighs, her hair a messy halo around her face. She didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city outside was enough. She opened the refrigerator, reaching for a pitcher of water. "I would not drink the tap water if I were you." "The filters in this building are questionable." Maya jumped. Spinning around, Luca was leaning against the marble island, eating an apple. He wasn't wearing a shirt. Maya's breath hitched. She'd seen men without shirts before. She worked in physical therapy. The human body was her profession. But this was different. Luca was carved from marble and scarred by war. His chest and torso were a roadmap of violence. There was a jagged white line running across his ribs, a knife wound, perhaps, a round, puckered scar on his left shoulder, a bullet, faint. Silvery lines crisscrossed his abs. He was beautiful, in a terrifying, ruined way. "Sorry," Luca said, though he didn't make a move to cover himself. "I didn't think you were awake. I was thirsty," Maya managed to say, clutching the water pitcher to her chest like a shield. Luca stepped forward, moving into the pool of moonlight that spilled from the window. He took a glass from the rack and held it out to her. "Here." Maya took the glass, her fingers brushing against his. A spark. Literal static electricity snapped between them. Neither of them pulled away. Maya's eyes drifted from his face down to his chest again. She couldn't help it. Her clinical brain wanted to trace the scar tissue, to understand the mechanics of how he was still standing. Her heart just wanted to touch him. "Does it hurt?" she whispered, her gaze landing on the long scar across his ribs. Luca looked down, as if surprised to find the mark there. "Only when it rains," he said softly. He looked back up at her. His eyes were dark, stripped of their usual guarded arrogance. In the moonlight, with his hair messy and his defenses down, he looked younger, less like a kingpin, more like a survivor. "You should sleep." "Maya," he said, his voice rough. "You look tired." "I am tired," she admitted. "I am tired of being afraid." Luca's expression hardened, but the anger wasn't directed at her. "I know." He said, "I am working on it." He stepped back, breaking the tension. Maya fled to the living room, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She lay on the new couch for an hour, staring at the ceiling. The image of his scarred chest burned into her mind. 2 days later, the fragile piece of the apartment shattered. Maya was sitting at the kitchen island, reviewing patient charts, when the front door opened. It didn't open smoothly. It was shoved inward with force. Luca stumbled in. He was alone. His suit jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was torn at the shoulder, stained with dirt and grease. He was breathing hard, favoring his left leg. Maya dropped her pen and was on her feet in an instant. "Luca!" She rushed to him as he leaned against the wall, trying to toe off his shoes. "I am fine." He grunted, waving her away. "Just a skirmish." "You are limping," Maya accused, grabbing his arm to support him. "Sit down, now." She forced him onto one of the bar stools. Up close. He looked worse. His knuckles were raw and bloody. The skin split open from impact. There was a darkening bruise on his jawline. He smelled of gunpowder and stale sweat. Maya's fear spiked, hot and sharp, but it quickly curdled into anger. "Look at you," she hissed, grabbing his hands and inspecting the damaged knuckles. "You treat your life like it is a game, like you are just a piece on a board that can be knocked over and set back up again." "They hit a supply truck," Luca said, wincing as she prodded a swollen joint. "I had to handle it." "You have men for that," Maya shouted. "You have an army. Why are you out there throwing punches in alleyways?" "Because my men bleed too," Luca snapped, pulling his hand away. "And I do not lead from the back." He tried to stand, but Maya placed her hands on his chest and shoved him back down. "Sit still. Let me check your pulse. You look like you are going to pass out." She grabbed his wrists, her thumbs pressing against the radial artery. Her skin was cool against his feverish heat. She counted the beats, fast, thudding, powerful. He was alive. He was solid. The anger drained out of her, leaving only a raw, aching, terrifying worry. "You are an idiot," she whispered, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "You are going to get yourself killed. And for what? For territory? For pride?" Luca went still. He looked at her hands, holding his wrists. Then he looked up at her face. The distance between them was non-existent. Maya was standing between his knees, her body leaning into his, her concern naked and undeniable. "Why do you care?" Luca asked. His voice was barely a whisper, low and vibrating with intensity. Maya froze. "You hate me. Remember?" he continued, his eyes searching hers. "You hate my world. You hate what I do. So why are you shaking? Why do you care if I bleed? Maya started, but the words stuck in her throat. She looked at his mouth. There was a small cut on his lower lip. "I don't want more blood in my life," she muttered, her defense weak even to her own ears. Luca didn't buy it. He released a breath that lifted the loose strands of hair near her temple. He freed one of his hands from her grip and reached up. He cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the sharp line of her jaw. His skin was rough, calloused, dangerous. "Maya," he said. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. The gravity was too strong. He leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her 1,000 chances to run, 1,000 chances to push him away. She stayed. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't an explosion, it was a collision of two desperate forces. He kissed her deeply, slowly, with a hunger that tasted of iron and expensive scotch. Maya let out a small, strangled sound and melted into him. Her hands, which had been checking his pulse, slid up his arms, bunching the fabric of his ruined shirt in her fists. He groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure need, and pulled her closer. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, tangling in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the angle. His other hand moved to the small of her back, pressing her flush against his chest. She could feel everything. The heat of his skin through the thin shirt, the hardness of his muscles, the thud of his heart beating in sync with hers. The city sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder of the danger outside. But in here, there was only this, only him. Maya arched into him, her body betraying every principle she had ever held. She kissed him back, fierce and demanding. She tasted the violence on him, the darkness, and God help her. She wanted it. She wanted to consume it so it couldn't hurt him anymore. for a minute. The world shrank to the heat of his mouth and the desperate grip of his hands. Then, reality crashed back in. Maya realized what she was doing. She was kissing the man who represented everything that had destroyed her family. She was falling for the darkness. She broke the kiss, gasping for air, and stumbled back. "No," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Her lips felt swollen, sensitive. Luca stayed on the stool, his chest heaving, his eyes black with desire. He reached for her. "Maya, don't," she said, backing away until she hit the refrigerator. I cannot do this." "Why?" Luca asked, his voice raw. "Do not tell me you didn't feel that." "I felt it," Maya cried, tears finally spilling over. "That is the problem. I feel it and I hate it. I cannot love someone who causes so much pain. Luca, I cannot love a man who comes home with blood on his hands and calls it a Tuesday." Luca flinched as if she had struck him. He stood up, ignoring the pain in his leg. "I'm trying to keep you safe," he said, his voice hard, defensive. "I don't want to be safe," Maya shouted. "I want to be good, and I cannot be good with you." She turned to run to her room, unable to look at him, unable to face the shattered look in his eyes. Luca didn't follow her. He stood in the kitchen, alone, wiping the blood from his lip with the back of his hand. "I will make you safe." "Maya," he said to the empty room, a dark promise to the air. "Even if I have to burn the rest of the world down to do it, even if you hate me for it." The moment was shattered by the ring of his cell phone on the counter. It was a sharp, jarring sound. Luca stared at it for a second, then picked it up. "What?" he barked. The voice on the other end was Rico, and the tone was frantic. "Boss, we have a problem, a big one. Speak," Luca commanded, his eyes still fixed on the hallway where Maya had disappeared. "The Vegas." Rico said, "They didn't just hit the truck. That was a distraction. They grabbed someone. A civilian." "Who?" Luca asked, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "A nurse from the clinic." Rico said, "Name is Jenna." "They think she is the one who stitched you up. They sent a picture. They want to trade. Boss, they want you, or the girl dies." Luca lowered the phone slowly. He looked at the closed door of the guest room. Jenna, Maya's best friend, the only person in the world Maya loved as much as her mother. The Vegas hadn't just escalated the war. They had just forced Maya into the center of the kill box. Luca closed his eyes, his hand tightening around the phone until the screen cracked. "Get the car," he whispered. He had promised to keep her safe, but tonight, he knew he was going to have to break her heart to save her soul. The silence in the penthouse was shattered not by a scream, but by the soft, terrifying chime of a phone receiving an image. Luca stared at the screen, his face draining of color until he looked like a marble statue of grief. He did not speak. He simply handed the phone to Rico, who stood by the door, his expression grim. "What is it?" Maya asked. Her voice was thin, trembling. She had been standing near the kitchen island, hugging herself, her body still humming with the confusing, electric memory of Luca's kiss. But the atmosphere had shifted. The air was no longer charged with desire. It was heavy with dread. Rico looked at the phone, then at Maya. He hesitated. "Show me," Maya commanded. She stepped forward, her fear turning into a sharp, cold clarity. Rico lowered the phone so she could see. It was a photo of a woman tied to a wooden chair in a dark, industrial room. Her head was slumped forward, blonde hair matted with sweat and dirt. Her lip was split. It was Jenna. Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Jenna, her best friend, Jenna, who fainted at the sight of needles and brought stray kittens to the clinic. Jenna, who had nothing to do with this world. The text below the image read, "We have the medic. Trade at midnight. Your life for hers. Or we send her back in pieces. They think she is you," Luca said. His voice was hollow. "They think she is the one who stitched me up. They watched the clinic. They saw you two leaving together, and they grabbed the wrong girl." A sound tore out of Maya's throat, half sob, half scream. She lunged at Luca, shoving him hard in the chest. He did not move. He took the impact, standing like a stone pillar as she hammered her fists against his shoulders. "This is your fault," she screamed. the tears finally spilling over, hot and blinding. She has nothing to do with this. She's a civilian. She just wants to get married and open a bakery, and now she is bleeding in a chair because of you. I know, Lucas said. He caught her wrists, stopping her assault, but his grip was gentle. I know. Maya, you dragged everyone I love into your hell, Maya sobbed, collapsing against him as her legs gave out. First my father, now Jenna. Everyone dies around you. I will get her back, Luca vowed. He held her up, his voice fierce. I swear to you, Maya, I will get her back tonight. Rico, ready the team. We're going to tear the city apart until we find where they are holding her. They are at the old textile mill. Maya gasped, pulling away from him and wiping her face with the back of her hand. Luca paused. How do you know that? Look at the photo, Maya said, pointing at Rico's phone with a shaking finger. Look at the floor. It is blue concrete, and there is a yellow pillar in the background with a number 4 on it. So, Rico asked. So, I used to take the shortcut through the industrial district when I worked the late shift at the diner 3 years ago, Maya said, her voice gaining strength. The textile mill on 5th and Grand. It is the only building with blue floors in the packing room. I used to hide in there when it rained. Lucas stared at her. He looked at the photo again, then at Rico. Check it, he ordered. Rico tapped rapidly on his tablet. 2 minutes later, he looked up, his eyes wide. She is right, boss. The Vegas bought the property through a shell company 2 months ago. It is off the grid, but the blueprints match. Let's go, Lucas said, grabbing his jacket from the back of the sofa. He checked the magazine of his handgun and slid it into the holster at his waist. I am coming with you, Maya said. No. Luca turned on her, his expression hard. Absolutely not. You stay here where it is safe. I am not staying here while my best friend is tortured because of me, Maya shouted. I know the building. Luca, I know the layout better than you do. The main doors will be guarded, but there is a loading chute on the south side that leads directly to the basement boiler room. It is too small for your men, but I can fit. I can get the doors open from the inside. It is too dangerous, Luca argued, stepping closer to her. I cannot lose you. Maya, you do not have me to lose. She shot back. But if Jenna dies tonight, you will never see me again. I will make sure of it. They stared at each other, a silent battle of wills waging in the center of the luxury apartment. Luca saw the resolve in her eyes, the same fire that had made her save his life that first night. He knew he could not stop her. Fine, he growled. You come, but you stay in the car until I say otherwise. You draw me a map, and you stay put. Do you understand? Maya nodded once. I understand. The night was thick with fog as the convoy of black SUVs rolled silently into the industrial district. The old textile mill loomed against the sky like a rotting skeleton, its windows broken teeth, its smokestacks reaching into the gloom. Luca parked the lead car 2 blocks away, hidden in the shadows of an underpass. He turned to Maya in the back seat. Stay here, he ordered. Tony stays with you. Do not leave this car. Maya, if things go wrong, Tony gets you out. I drew you the map, Maya said, her hands clutching her knees. The chute is behind the dumpsters. It leads to the ventilation shaft. I have it, Luca said. He reached out and squeezed her hand, a brief, crushing pressure. We will bring her back. He got out, vanishing into the mist with Rico and 6 other heavily armed men. Maya sat in the dark, listening to the rain drum against the roof. Tony, a large man with a thick neck and a silent demeanor, sat in the driver's seat, watching the street. 10 minutes passed. The silence was agonizing. Maya imagined Jenna in that chair. She imagined the Vegas hurting her, asking questions she couldn't answer. I cannot do this, Maya whispered. She looked at Tony. He was focused on the windshield. Tony, Maya said loudly, I think I see someone behind us. Tony whipped his head around to check the rear view. In that split second of distraction, Maya yanked the door handle and threw herself out into the wet street. Hey, Tony shouted, fumbling with his seat belt. Maya didn't look back. She ran. She didn't have the stamina of a soldier, but she had the desperation of a sister. She sprinted through the alleyway, her boots splashing in puddles, ducking under a chain-link fence she knew was broken. She reached the south side of the mill. The loading chute was there. just as she remembered, half hidden by rusted machinery. It was narrow, grimed with coal dust and decades of filth. She shimmied inside, the metal scraping against her jacket. It was a tight squeeze, claustrophobic and dark, but she pushed through, dropping down into the boiler room. The air inside smelled of mold and damp concrete. She moved quietly, her heart pounding so loud she was sure it would echo off the walls. She crept up the metal stairs, following the distant sound of voices. She emerged onto the main factory floor, hiding behind a stack of rotting pallets. The scene below was a nightmare bathed in the flickering light of a single, hanging bulb. Jenna was tied to a chair in the center of the floor. 2 men were circling her. One of them held a knife. "Where is Marino?" the man shouted, slapping Jenna across the face. "I don't know," Jenna screamed, sobbing. "I am a nurse. I don't know who that is." Maya clamped a hand over her mouth to stop her own cry. She scanned the room. There were 4 other gunmen stationed around the perimeter. Suddenly, the skylights above shattered. Ropes dropped from the darkness. Luca's men descended like wraiths. At the same moment, the main doors blew open with a concussive blast. "Marino!" Luca's voice roared over the noise. Gunfire erupted. It was chaos. The Vega men scrambled for cover, returning fire. Bullets sparked against the machinery, sending showers of hot metal into the air. The sound was deafening, a continuous thunder that rattled Maya's teeth. She saw her chance. While the gunmen were focused on Luca's team entering from the north, Jenna was left unguarded in the center of the crossfire. Maya broke cover. She stayed low, sprinting across the open floor, debris crunching under her boots. "Maya!" Jenna screamed when she saw her. "Shh! I have you!" Maya gasped, reaching her friend. She pulled a pair of trauma shears from her back pocket. She had grabbed them from her bag before leaving the car and sawed frantically at the ropes binding Jenna's wrists. "We have to go," Maya said, her hands shaking. "We have to move." The rope snapped. Jenna slumped forward, weeping. Maya grabbed her arm, hauling her up. "Run! Jenna, go to the back exit!" She shoved Jenna toward the shadows of the boiler room stairs. Jenna stumbled, looked back once, and then ran, disappearing into the safety of the dark. Maya turned to follow her, but movement caught her eye. She looked up. Above the factory floor, there was a rusted iron catwalk that ran the length of the building. A man was lying prone on the grating, hidden from the view of Luca and his men on the ground. He had a long rifle, a sniper. He wasn't aiming at the door. He was aiming at the center of the room. Maya followed the line of his barrel. Luca had moved out from behind cover to drag a wounded Vega soldier out of the line of fire. He was exposed. He was standing still for a fraction of a second, shouting orders to Rico. The sniper adjusted his aim. He was going to take the headshot. "Luca!" Maya screamed. He didn't hear her over the roar of assault rifles. There was no time to think, no time to calculate. There was only the terrifying certainty that in 1 second, Luca would be dead. Maya ran. She didn't run away. She ran toward him. She sprinted across the gap between the pallets and Luca's position, her legs pumping harder than they ever had in her life. She threw herself at him. She didn't tackle him. She shoved him with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her hands connected with his chest, pushing him violently to the right. Luca stumbled back, off balance, his eyes widening in shock as he saw her face. The sniper fired. The sound was different from the other gunshots, a sharp, high-pitched crack. Maya felt a blow like a sledgehammer to her lower back. There was no pain at first, just a massive, kinetic impact that lifted her off her feet. The air was punched out of her lungs. She spun in the air, her vision fracturing into kaleidoscope shards of light and shadow, and then she hit the concrete floor hard. The world went silent. The gunfire seemed to mute, turning into a dull, distant throbbing. Maya lay on her stomach, her cheek pressed against the cold, gritty floor. She blinked. Why was the floor vibrating? Maya, the scream was ragged, tearing through the silence in her head. She tried to push herself up. She planted her hands on the ground and pushed. Her upper body rose, but her legs didn't follow. She frowned. That was odd. She tried to scramble forward, to crawl to cover. Her arms moved. Her torso twisted, but from the waist down, she was an anchor, dead weight. She felt a strange, cold tingling spreading through her hips, like limbs falling asleep, followed by a terrifying, absolute nothingness. Luca was there. He skidded across the concrete, dropping his gun, falling to his knees beside her. Maya, no, no, no! His hands were on her, frantic, searching. He turned her over gently. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes were wild, darting over her body. Maya looked down. There was blood. So much blood. It was pooling beneath her, dark and shiny in the bad light. It was soaking into her jeans, spreading across the blue concrete floor she had remembered from years ago. "Luca," she whispered. Her voice sounded wet. "I have you," Luca choked out. He pressed his hands against the wound in her back, his fingers slippery with her blood. "Rico, medic, get the car, now!" He scooped her up into his arms. Maya's head lolled back against his shoulder. She looked up at the ceiling, at the broken skylights where the rain was falling in slow motion. "Why can't I feel my feet?" she asked. Her voice was small, childlike. "Luca, my boots are gone. Did I lose my boots?" "You are okay," Luca lied, his voice breaking, and he was running now, carrying her through the chaos, ignoring the dying gunfire around them. "You are going to be okay. Stay with me. Maya, look at me. Do not close your eyes." She looked at him. She saw the tears streaming down his face, mixing with the grime and blood. She had never seen a monster cry before. "I am cold," she whispered. The drive to the hospital was a blur of speed and noise. Maya was lying across the back seat of the SUV, her head in Luca's lap. He was applying pressure to the wound, his body curled over hers protectively. Rico was driving like a madman, swerving through traffic, horn blaring. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness. Every time she closed her eyes, Luca would shake her, his voice a jagged growl in her ear. "Wake up! You do not get to leave me, Maya! Fight it! I am trying," she slurred. She tried to move her legs again. She concentrated with everything she had. Move the big toe, flex the ankle, bend the knee. Nothing. It was as if her body ended at her waist. There was no pain anymore, just a vast, terrifying silence where her lower half used to be. The connection was severed. The wire was cut. "Luca," she gasped, panic finally piercing through the shock. "Luca, I cannot move them. I cannot feel them." "It is the shock," Luca said, his voice trembling. He kissed her forehead, his lips sticky with sweat and blood. "It is just the shock. You will be fine. You are the strongest person I know. You fix broken things. Remember? You will fix this." He was pleading with her, or maybe with God. The car screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance. The doors flew open. White lights blinded her. Voices shouted, hands grabbed her, lifting her onto a gurney. Luca's hand was gripping hers so hard she thought her bones would break. She clung to him as the world tilted and spun. "Don't let go," she begged. "I am right here," Luca promised, running alongside the gurney. "I am right here." They reached the double doors of the surgery wing. A nurse stepped in front of Luca, holding him back. "Sir, you cannot come in. I am not leaving her," Luca roared, looking ready to murder anyone who stood in his way. "Let him go," Maya whispered, her strength fading rapidly. The darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, soft and inviting. Luca stopped fighting. He looked at her one last time before the doors swung shut. He looked like a man who was watching his own heart being ripped out of his chest. "Please," he mouthed. Then the darkness took her. The waiting room was a purgatory of beige walls and fluorescent lights. Luca sat in a hard plastic chair, staring at the vending machine across the hall. The light flickered with a low, electric hum. Buzz, click, buzz. He was still covered in blood. It had dried on his hands, cracking when he made a fist. It stained his shirt, his pants, his shoes. People gave him a wide berth. Security had come and gone, taken one look at Rico standing guard by the entrance, and decided not to intervene. 4 hours. She'd been in there for 4 hours. Jenna was safe. Rico had taken her to a private clinic. She was battered, but she would heal. But Maya... Luca closed his eyes and saw it again. The way she had run toward him, the way she had shoved him, the sound of the bullet hitting her. She'd taken a bullet for him. She, who hated violence. Who hated him. She had sacrificed herself to save the monster. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing his lungs. He should have left her at the apartment. He should have locked her in a room. He should have never walked into that club the first night. Mr. Marino? Luca's head snapped up. A surgeon in blue scrubs stood before him. He looked exhausted. Is she alive? Luca asked. His voice was a rusted grate. The surgeon nodded. She is alive. We managed to stop the bleeding and repair the damage to her internal organs. She is stable. Luca let out a breath that was half sob. Thank God. But, the surgeon continued, his expression grave, the bullet clipped the L3 vertebra. It caused significant trauma to the spinal cord. Luca stood up slowly. What are you saying? I am saying that the damage is severe, the surgeon said gently. We have done what we can to relieve the pressure, but it is unlikely she will regain function in her legs. She is paralyzed from the waist down. The world stopped. The buzzing of the vending machine ceased. Paralyzed, Luca stared at the doctor. Maya, who walked everywhere. Maya, who believed movement was freedom. Maya, who rushed between two jobs on her own 2 feet. Can I see her? Luca asked. She's waking up from the anesthesia now. The surgeon said, and keep it brief. She needs rest. Luca walked down the hallway like a man marching to his execution. He entered the recovery room. It was quiet. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. Maya lay in the bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her eyes were open. They were staring at the ceiling. Luca approached the bed. He was terrified to touch her. He felt like a contagion, a curse. Maya? He whispered. Her eyes moved slowly to his face. They were glassy, drugged, but the intelligence was there. And the fear. Luca, she rasped. I cannot feel my legs. Luca grabbed a chair and pulled it close to the bed. He sat down and took her hand. It was cold. I know, he said, I spoke to the doctor. Is it permanent? She asked. A tear slid from the corner of her eye into her hair. We will get the best specialists, Luca said quickly, fiercely. I will fly in doctors from Switzerland, from Tokyo. Money is not an object. Maya, we will try everything, but right now? Maya asked. Right now? No. You cannot walk. Maya closed her eyes, her chest hitched with a silent sob. My job, my life. I can't be me if I can't move. Luca watched her pain, and it tore him apart. He wanted to take it away. He wanted to promise her that it didn't matter, that he would be her legs, that he would carry her for the rest of her life if he had to. He was so overwhelmed by the sheer, terrifying relief that she wasn't dead that his brain short-circuited. He leaned over her, gripping her hand tighter. He brought his face close to hers, his eyes burning with an intense, possessive fervor. You are alive, he whispered, his voice cracking. That is all that matters. You are here. He brushed the hair back from her forehead. Now you will never run again. Do you hear me? He said, the words tumbling out in a rush of broken relief. I won't let you leave me. He meant it as a vow of devotion. He meant that he would never let her be in danger again, that he would keep her close where he could protect her. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he saw Maya's eyes fly open. He saw the way her pupils dilated. He saw the horror that flooded her gaze, replacing the sadness. She looked at him not as her savior, but as her jailer. She heard the words literally, "You will never run again." Luca froze. He realized what he had said. He realized how it sounded to a woman who had just lost her freedom, coming from a man who controlled everything he touched. "Maya," he stammered, pulling back. "No, I didn't mean... I meant I can't lose you." Maya pulled her hand away from his grip. Her breathing spiked on the monitor. Beep, 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 beep. "Get out," she whispered. "Maya, please, get out." She screamed, her voice weak but hysterical. "You did this. You wanted this. Now I am trapped. No," Luca pleaded. Standing up, "Nurse," Maya screamed. "Get him away from me." 2 nurses rushed into the room. Luca stood there, hands raised, looking at the woman he loved. She was looking at him with pure hatred and terror. He had saved her life, but with one sentence, he had destroyed her trust forever. "Sir, you need to leave," the nurse said sternly. Luca backed away, his heart shattering in his chest. He looked at Maya one last time. She had turned her head away, sobbing into the pillow. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence of her broken body. The sound of rubber wheels rolling over Italian marble was a noise Maya had learned to despise. It was a soft, rhythmic hum that followed her everywhere, a constant reminder of the gravity that now anchored her to the floor. It had been 6 weeks since the shooting. 6 weeks since the sensation in her legs had vanished, replaced by a heavy, static silence. Maya sat in her wheelchair by the floor-to-ceiling window of Luca's penthouse, staring out at the Harborview skyline. From 40 stories up, the city looked peaceful. The cars were just toys moving along gray ribbons of concrete. People were specks. But Maya knew better. Down there, people were walking. They were running to catch buses, dancing in clubs, stepping over puddles. They were free. She looked down at her own legs. They were dressed in soft gray sweatpants, resting motionless on the footrests of the chair. They looked like they belonged to someone else. Movement is freedom. The mantra she used to tell her patients tasted like ash in her mouth. She had built her life on independence, on the ability to work 2 jobs and stand on her own 2 feet. Now, she couldn't even use the bathroom without assistance. The humiliation was a slow, daily poison. Every morning, a nurse hired by Luca came to help her shower. Every evening, she had to navigate the sprawling apartment with the awareness that she was an obstacle in a perfectly curated world. The apartment was beautiful, but it was a fortress, and she was the prisoner in the tower. Maya turned her chair away from the window. The living room was empty, but she knew she wasn't alone. She rolled into the hallway. 2 large men in suits stood by the elevator doors. One of them, a man named Russo, nodded at her. "Good afternoon, Miss Torres." Maya ignored him. She rolled past them toward the kitchen. At the kitchen entrance, another guard stood watch. It was suffocating. Luca had turned the penthouse into a golden cage, terrified that the Vegas would finish what they started. She found Luca in the kitchen, reading a stack of documents at the island. He looked up immediately as she entered, his eyes scanning her face with that intense, hyper-vigilant radar he had developed since the hospital. "Do you need anything?" he asked, setting the papers down. "Water? Pain medication?" "I need to breathe," Maya said, her voice sharp. "Can we open a window? The windows are sealed for safety," Luca said gently. "I can adjust the climate control if you are too warm." "I am not warm. Luca, I am trapped." She rolled closer to the counter. The wheels of her chair squeaked. It was a high-end model, carbon fiber and lightweight, costing more than her mother's house, but it still squeaked. "I want to go outside," she said. "We cannot do that yet," Luca replied, his jaw tightening. "The Vegas are still active. It is not safe. It is never going to be safe," Maya snapped. "So what is the plan? I just roll around this glass box for the next 50 years while you play war games?" "I am handling it," Luca said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I am dismantling them piece by piece. Once they are gone, we can go wherever you want. Paris, Tokyo, anywhere." "I don't want to go to Paris," Maya said, her hands gripping the wheels until her knuckles turned white. "I want to go to the grocery store. I want to go to work." She spun the chair around, frustration boiling over, and headed back toward the bedroom. She heard Luca's footsteps behind her, heavy and fast. He caught up to her in the hallway, his hand reaching out to grab the handle of her chair to stop her. "Don't," Maya warned, slapping his hand away. "Do not push me. I can do it myself." Luca pulled his hand back as if burned. He stood there, watching her struggle to maneuver the chair over the threshold of the bedroom door. He looked helpless. A man who could command armies but couldn't fix the one thing that mattered. That night, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to choke on. Maya had dismissed the evening nurse early, determined to prove she could manage the bedtime routine alone. She had managed to brush her teeth and wash her face, but transferring from the chair to the high mattress of the bed was a different battle. She locked the brakes on the wheelchair. She scooted forward, positioning her feet on the floor. She grabbed the edge of the mattress. 1, 2, 3. She pushed with her arms, trying to swing her hips across the gap, but her center of gravity was off. Her arms shook with exhaustion from the day's physical therapy. She slipped. With a gasp, she slid into the gap between the chair and the bed, hitting the floor with a dull thud. "Damn it," she cried out, slamming her hand against the carpet. Tears of pure frustration sprang to her eyes. The bedroom door flew open instantly. Luca was there, gun in hand, scanning the room for a threat. When he saw her on the floor, the weapon clattered to the bedside table, and he was on his knees beside her in a heartbeat. "Maya, are you okay? Did you hit your head?" "Go away," Maya sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Just leave me alone." "I am not leaving you on the floor," Luca said. He slipped his arms under her, one beneath her knees, the other around her waist. He didn't ask for permission this time. He lifted her effortlessly, his strength mocking her weakness. He placed her gently on the edge of the bed. He didn't step back. He stayed there, crouching slightly so they were eye level, his hands still resting on her waist and thigh to steady her. "You should have called me," he said softly. "I hate this," Maya whispered, wiping her wet cheeks. "I hate needing you. I hate that I cannot move. I hate my own body." Luca's grip tightened on her waist. His thumbs rubbed small, soothing circles into the fabric of her nightshirt. "Your body is not broken, Maya. It is just different. You are still the strongest woman I have ever met. You are just saying that because you feel guilty," Maya spat. Looking up at him, Luca went still. His eyes were dark pools of sorrow. "I feel guilty every second of every day." He admitted, "But that is not why I say it. I say it because I see you fighting." He leaned closer, adjusting her position on the bed so she wouldn't fall. His chest brushed against her knees. The scent of him, soap and sandalwood, filled her senses. For a moment, the anger and the shame swirled together into something hotter, something more volatile. Maya looked at him. She saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. She saw the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with a reverence that terrified her. He was so close. His hands were so warm. Maya she couldn't think anymore. She reached out and grabbed the lapels of his shirt, pulling him down. Luca let out a sharp intake of breath as their mouths collided. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was wet with her tears and fueled by the rage of her situation. Maya kissed him because she needed to feel something other than numbness. She needed to feel alive. Luca hesitated for a fraction of a second, shocked, but then he surrendered. His hands moved from her waist to cup her face, his fingers threading into her hair. He kissed her back with an aching tenderness, his lips moving against hers with a slow, deliberate pressure. He was careful. He didn't put his full weight on her. He hovered over her, protecting her even in the middle of the storm. Maya gasped, her mouth opening to him. She felt his tongue brush hers, a shock of heat that traveled straight down her spine. Her hand slid from his collar to his shoulders, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "Luca," she breathed against his mouth. He groaned low in his throat. He pulled back slightly, just an inch, to look at her. His pupils were blown wide. His breathing was ragged. He trailed his lips down her jawline, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the pulse point below her ear. His hand moved down her arm, his fingertips grazing the sensitive skin of her inner elbow. Then her ribs. Maya shivered. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a patient. She felt like a woman. She felt the heat pooling in her belly, a stark contrast to the cold stillness of her legs. She arched her back, pressing her chest against his. They were fully clothed, but the intimacy was overwhelming. It was a communion of grief and desire. Luca pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held her tightly, his body trembling against hers. They stayed like that for a long time, rocking slightly, the silence of the room heavy with unsaid words. When they finally pulled apart, the air was cold between them. Maya looked down at her hands. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on her. She had kissed the man responsible for her paralysis. She had sought comfort in the arms of the person who had put her in the chair. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Like what?" Luca asked, his voice rough. Like I am something precious, she said. Like you are. Relieved. Luca frowned, confused. Relieved? You are glad I cannot walk, aren't you? The words hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Luca recoiled as if she had slapped him. What? You said it at the hospital, Maya whispered, meeting his gaze. You said, now you will never run again. You said you wouldn't let me leave. Luca's face paled. He stood up, backing away from the bed. Maya, no, I was in shock. I was terrified. But it is true, isn't it? She pressed, the bitterness spilling out. This is what you wanted. You wanted me here, trapped, safe in your tower where no one can touch me but you. Now you don't have to worry about me running away because I physically can't. Luca looked devastated. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. How can you think that? He demanded, his voice cracking. Do you think I want this for you? Do you think I like seeing you in that chair? I think you like the control, Maya said. Luca stopped pacing. He turned to her, his eyes blazing with a fierce, wounded light. I would give anything, he said, his voice shaking. Anything. I would give my empire. I would give my own legs. I would give my life right now if it meant you could stand up and walk out that door. He walked back to the bed, gripping the footboard. I would watch you run away from me. Maya, I would watch you sprint down the street and never look back, and I would be happy, because it would mean you were whole. Do not ever think I wanted this. This is my nightmare. He looked at her one last time. His expression shattered, and then turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind him. 3 days later, Maya's physical therapy session was interrupted. She was at the private rehabilitation center Luca had arranged, a facility that cost more per hour than she used to make in a month. She was working on her upper body strength, lifting weights to compensate for the muscles she could no longer use. Her mother, Elena, was waiting in the lobby. But when Maya wheeled herself out, her mother wasn't alone. A man in a cheap gray suit was sitting next to her. He had kind eyes but a sharp, calculating posture. Maya, Elena said, standing up nervously. This is Mr. Harper. He says he can help us. Maya's guard went up instantly. Who are you? Agent Harper. FBI, the man said. He didn't flash a badge. He just handed her a business card. I have been trying to reach you, Miss Torres, but Mr. Marino's security is very thorough. What do you want? Maya asked, looking around for Luca's guards. They were outside by the car, out of earshot for once. I want to offer you a way out, Harper said. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. We know about the kidnapping. We know about the shooting. And we know that Luca Marino is the reason you are in that chair. I don't have anything to say to you, Maya said, turning her chair. Wait, Harper said. It is not just about justice. Maya, it is about your future. Maya stopped. The Bureau has a program for witnesses in high-profile organized crime cases. Harper said, we have access to experimental rehabilitation facilities, cutting-edge spinal research in Switzerland, exoskeleton trials, things insurance won't cover and Marino's dirty money can't buy without raising flags. Maya felt a jolt in her chest. Switzerland, the same place Luca had mentioned. If you testify, Harper continued, we can get you into those programs. We can get you and your mother out of Harborview. We can give you a chance to walk again. Maya stared at him. To walk again. To feel the ground beneath her feet. What do you need? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I need proof, Harper said. Marino is planning something big. A weapons deal with the cartel to recoup the losses from the war with the Vegas. We need the date, the location, and the ledger. You are inside the penthouse. You see things no one else sees. He pressed the card into her hand. Think about it. Maya, he took your legs. Don't let him take your life too. The card burned a hole in Maya's pocket for 2 days. She told herself she wouldn't do it. She told herself that betraying Luca was wrong, that despite everything, he loved her. But then she would look at the wheelchair. She would look at the guards at the door. She would remember the feeling of being trapped in the apartment while the world moved on without her. She wasn't doing it to hurt him. She reasoned she was doing it to stop him. If he went to prison, the violence would stop. He would be alive, and she would be free. She began to watch him. When Luca took calls in the study, she would roll silently down the hallway, listening at the door. She learned about a shipment coming into the container port. She learned about a meeting with a man named El Santo. She waited for him to shower, then slipped into the study. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she rifled through the papers on his desk. She found a ledger, a small black book with dates and coordinates. She took a picture of one of the pages with her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the device. Guilt washed over her, a nauseating wave. He had saved her life. He had slept on the floor beside her bed when she had nightmares. But then she remembered Mrs. Gable. She remembered Jenna's bruised face. She remembered the sound of the gun firing. This has to end, she whispered to herself. The explosion happened on a Tuesday. Maya was in the living room, reading a book she wasn't actually processing. Luca had come home early. He was pacing the room, agitated. The deal with the cartel was days away. The tension was palpable. He stopped in front of her. "Give me your phone," he said. Maya looked up, her pulse spiking. "What? Your phone?" "Maya, give it to me." "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Because I found a signal relay on the network," Luca said, his voice deadly calm. "Someone inside this apartment sent an encrypted image to a federal server yesterday at 4 o'clock. You were the only one here." Maya went cold. She didn't move. Luca stepped closer. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. "Tell me I am wrong," he pleaded. "Tell me you didn't talk to Harper." Maya lifted her chin. She couldn't lie to him, not about this. "He offered me a way out," she said quietly. Luca let out a roar of frustration that shook the walls. He grabbed a crystal vase from the table and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. A violent explosion of glass. "A way out," he shouted, turning on her. "You think the feds care about you? They will chew you up and spit you out the second they get what they want. Harper doesn't give a damn about your legs. Maya, he just wants another notch on his belt. He wants to help me walk," Maya screamed back, slamming her hands on the armrests of her chair. "And that is more than you can do. You keep me locked in here like a pet. You say it is for my safety, but it is for your ego. I am the only thing standing between you and a grave," Luca roared. "The Vegas know you are alive. If I go down, if you put me away, who protects you? The feds? They will put you in a motel in Arizona and forget about you in 6 months. I would rather be in a motel in Arizona than in a cage with you," Maya yelled. Silence fell. Absolute, terrible silence. Luca stared at her, his chest heaving. The words hung between them, severing the last thread of intimacy that had survived the shooting. "Fine," Luca said. His voice was ice cold. He walked to the door. "You want to be free, Maya. You will get your wish, but not like this. I am going to finish the Vegas. I am going to end the war. And when I come back, if you still want to sell me out to Harper, then you can do it." He opened the door. "But until then, you stay here. For your own good." He slammed the door behind him. The lock clicked. Maya sat alone in the center of the beautiful, terrible room. She looked at her phone. She looked at the picture of the ledger. The weapons deal was in 2 days, at the docks. She knew where he was going. She knew he was walking into a trap. Harper had told her the feds were watching the port, but they didn't know about the ambush the Vegas were planning. She had heard that part on a phone call Luca didn't know she was listening to. The Vegas weren't just buying guns. They were planning to kill everyone at the meet. If Luca went there, he would die. Maya gripped her phone. She hated him. She loved him. She wanted to walk. She wanted him to live. She had to make a choice, and she knew, with a sinking certainty, that she couldn't stay in the chair any longer. The information came in a hushed phone call from Agent Harper, a courtesy warning that felt more like a death sentence. Maya sat in her wheelchair in the center of the silent penthouse, the phone pressed to her ear, her blood turning to ice. The federal sting was set for tonight. The weapons deal at the Harborview docks was the trap. Harper had sounded almost triumphant, detailing how they would net the Vegas, the cartel buyers, and Luca in one sweeping net. But then came the second piece of information, gleaned from the audio bugs Maya herself had helped place. The Vegas weren't planning to honor the deal. They had arranged a cleanup. Once the exchange was made, their snipers were instructed to leave no witnesses. Luca wasn't just walking into an arrest. He was walking into an execution. Maya dropped the phone into her lap. She looked at the empty apartment. For weeks, she had convinced herself that helping Harper was the only way to save Luca from himself. She had told herself that prison was better than a coffin. But now, she realized her naivety had paved the road for his murder. She couldn't let him die. Not like this. Not thinking she had betrayed him only to leave him to be butchered. She wheeled herself to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. The guard, a young man named Leo who had replaced Russo, looked down at her. "I need to see Rico," Maya said, her voice hard and unyielding. "Now." Leo hesitated. The boss said, "The boss is walking into a massacre." Maya interrupted, her eyes blazing. "If you do not get Rico on the phone right now, you are going to be explaining to his mother why you let him die on the cold concrete of the docks. Make the call." 20 minutes later. Rico stood in the hallway, listening to Maya explain the Vega Cross. He was a hardened man, loyal to the bone, and he knew enough about the Vegas to know Maya wasn't lying. "Get me to the docks," Maya ordered. "It is a war zone." "Maya," Rico argued, though he was already checking his weapon, "the boss will kill me if I bring you there." "He cannot kill you if he is dead," Maya snapped. "I know the layout, I know where the blind spots are. I can act as a lookout, I need to be there. Rico, I need to warn him." Rico stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Grab a coat, it is freezing down there." The Harborview docks were a graveyard of steel and shadows. The fog had rolled in off the water, thick and impenetrable, swirling around the legs of the massive cranes that loomed like skeletal giants against the night sky. Shipping containers were stacked in towering rows, forming a labyrinth of metal canyons. Rico had smuggled Maya into the site through a maintenance service road, bypassing the main security checkpoints. He wheeled her into an old, disused control room elevated on a rusty metal platform. It offered a panoramic view of the central loading bay where the deal was set to take place, yet remained shrouded in darkness. "Stay here," Rico whispered, handing her a heavy-duty walkie-talkie. "Channel 4. That goes straight to Luca's earpiece. Keep your head down." He disappeared into the mist to join the perimeter guard. Maya sat alone in the cold, damp room. She could see her breath puffing in the air. Below her, black SUVs were rolling into position. She saw Luca step out of the lead vehicle. Even from this distance, his presence was commanding. He wore a long black coat, his stance rigid, ready for violence. The cartel representatives arrived a moment later, 3 trucks filled with men who looked like they carved people up for sport, and lurking in the shadows of the container stacks. Maya saw the glint of scopes, the Vega snipers. And beyond them, invisible to everyone but her, the feds were waiting to spring the trap. The deal began. Voices drifted up, distorted by the wind. A briefcase was opened. Then the world exploded. It started with a floodlight blindingly bright, snapping on from a Coast Guard cutter in the harbor. "Federal agents, drop your weapons," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Chaos erupted. The Vegas didn't drop their weapons. They opened fire, not at the feds, but at Luca's men. The cartel returned fire indiscriminately. The feds swarmed from the sides, their tactical gear dark against the gray concrete. "Luca!" Maya screamed into the radio, pressing the button with a trembling thumb. "It is across. The Vegas are in the north stacks. Below." She saw Luca touch his ear, startled. He ducked behind a pallet of crates as bullets chewed up the ground where he had been standing a second ago. "Maya?" His voice crackled in her hand, disbelief warring with adrenaline. "Listen to me." Maya commanded, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. "You have a flanker coming up on your left. 2 men, behind the blue container." Luca spun out from cover, firing 2 precise shots to his left. 2 men dropped. "I see them." He shouted over the roar of gunfire. "Where are the snipers?" "Catwalk, Sector 4, Maya yelled, watching the muzzle flashes. "And the feds are closing in from the east gate. You are surrounded." "Luca, I am not leaving without you." Luca roared back. "Where are you? I am safe. Just fight." The battle raged for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Sirens wailed, echoing eerily over the water. The smell of gunpowder and burning rubber filled the control room. Maya was shouting directions, guiding Luca through the storm of bullets. Her voice the only thing keeping him alive in the crossfire. Then she saw it. The primary threats were neutralized. The feds were pinning down the cartel. Luca was reloading, his back pressed against a rusted shipping container, momentarily safe, but above him, on a precarious maintenance ledge that even Maya hadn't noticed. A massive Vega enforcer had pulled himself up. He had a clear line of sight to the back of Luca's head. "Luca! Behind you! Above!" Maya screamed into the radio. Static. The radio was dead. The battery, or the signal, had cut out. Luca didn't move. He was focused on the feds in front of him. The enforcer raised his rifle, taking his time, savoring the kill. "No," Maya whispered. She looked at the distance. She was 20 feet above the ground, in the control booth. There was nothing to throw, no way to reach him. She looked at her legs, her useless, heavy legs. Movement is freedom. It wasn't a thought. It was a primal, desperate command from her soul to her nerves. "Move!" Maya gripped the arms of her wheelchair. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure effort, and threw her weight forward. Pain, white-hot and electric, shot through her lower back. It was agony, but beneath the agony, there was something else. A flicker, a twitch, a ghost of a connection. She pushed. She locked her elbows. She forced her body to defy gravity, to defy the doctors, to defy the bullet that had severed her life. She stood. Her knees buckled instantly, trembling violently. But she caught herself on the rusted railing of the platform. She was standing. She took a step. It was a clumsy, dragging shuffle, but it was movement. She dragged her left leg forward, then her right. She reached for a heavy iron pipe leaning against the wall of the booth. She didn't have the strength to throw it, but she had the strength to knock it over. With a final, strangled cry of exertion, she shoved the pipe. It fell over the edge of the platform, clattering down onto the metal roof of the container below with a deafening, metallic crash that echoed through the entire shipyard. Clang! Luca whipped around at the noise, his instincts honing in on the sound. He saw the enforcer above him. The enforcer fired, but Luca was already moving, diving to the side. The bullet that was meant for his brain sparked harmlessly against the steel wall. Luca fired back from the ground. 3 rapid shots. The enforcer tumbled from the ledge, landing with a heavy thud. Luca scrambled up, his eyes searching the darkness above the container. He saw the control booth. He saw a silhouette holding onto the railing. "Maya," he whispered, his voice lost in the wind. Up in the booth. Maya's strength evaporated. The adrenaline that had bridged the gap in her spine burned out. Her legs gave way. She collapsed hard onto the concrete floor of the control room, the impact jarring her bones, but she didn't cry. As she lay there, gasping for air, staring at the rusted ceiling, a fierce, triumphant light burned in her eyes. She had moved. She had stood. She had saved him. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices. Federal agents swarmed the loading bay, securing the surviving cartel members and Vegas. Luca, ignoring the commands to freeze, sprinted toward the metal staircase that led to the control room. He found Maya on the floor, trying to push herself up. He dropped to his knees, sliding across the grime to reach her. He didn't care about the feds. He didn't care about the war. "You stood up," he gasped, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her in case she was broken. "I saw you. You stood up. I had to." Maya wheezed, grabbing his lapel. "I had to make noise." Agent Harper burst into the room, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 tactical officers. "Freeze," Harper shouted. "Marino, hands where I can see them." Luca didn't raise his hands. He kept them on Maya, shielding her body with his own. He looked over his shoulder at Harper with a snarl that was pure animalistic warning. "She needs a medic," Luca growled. "She is fine," Harper said, lowering his gun slightly but keeping it trained on Luca's chest. "But you are done. Marino, it is over." Maya struggled to sit up, leaning against Luca's chest for support. She looked at Harper. "Put the gun down." "Harper," she said, her voice breathless but commanding, "you are in no position to give orders." "Maya," Harper said, "you helped us. But he is the target. I have the ledger, Maya said. Silence fell in the small room. I have the photos, she continued. I have the dates. I have the accounts that link the Vegas to the politicians and the Marino syndicate to the overseas shipments. I have everything you need to clean up this city for good. Where is it? Harper demanded. It is on a cloud server, set to delete in 1 hour unless I enter a code. Maya lied smoothly. You want the big win? You want the Vegas and the corrupt councilman? Then we make a deal. What deal? Harper asked, his eyes narrowing. Luca cooperates, Maya said. He testifies. He gives you the entire network. He dismantles the syndicate from the inside out. In exchange, he gets protective custody, no maximum security, and when he serves his time, he walks free. Luca looked down at her. She was bargaining for his life with the evidence that could destroy him. She was asking him to burn down everything he had built, everything he was. Luca, Maya whispered, turning her face to his. Look at me. He looked at her. He saw the woman who had dragged him into a back room to save his life, the woman who had taken a bullet for him, the woman who had just defied medical science to keep him from dying. If you keep the Empire, you lose me, she said softly. If you fight them now, you die, or you go away for life. Choose, Luca, the power or the future. Luca looked at the gun in his holster. He looked at Harper, then he looked back at Maya. He realized, with a sudden clarity that washed away the anger, that the Empire had always been a cage. He had been just as trapped as she was. He slowly unbuckled his holster. He pulled the gun out with 2 fingers and set it on the floor. He raised his hands. I will testify, Luca said, his voice deep and resonant. I will give you everything. Harper let out a long breath and holstered his weapon. You made the right choice. Marino. Luca didn't look at the agent. He kept his eyes locked on Maya. He reached out and brushed a smudge of grease from her cheek. I told you I wouldn't let you run again, he murmured, a sad, crooked smile touching his lips. I guess I was wrong about that, too. I will wait for you, Maya promised. If I have to burn it all down to keep you, Luca said, leaning his forehead against hers, then let it burn. 18 months later, the therapy gym smelled of sanitizer and rubber mats. It was a bright, airy space, a stark contrast to the dark corners of Harborview. Maya stood between the parallel bars. She wore heavy leg braces that locked her knees in place, and sweat was dripping down her nose. Her arms shook with the effort of holding her weight. Again, the therapist said gently. Maya took a breath. She focused on her left foot. Move. It was a battle of inches, a war of millimeters. She swung her leg forward, her hip hiking up to clear the floor. The foot landed, clomp. She shifted her weight. She swung the right leg. Clomp. Movement is freedom. She whispered through gritted teeth. It wasn't a sprint. It wasn't a dance. It was ugly, grueling, painful work, but it was hers. She wasn't being carried. She wasn't being pushed. She was walking. Later that afternoon, she sat in the visitation room of the Federal Correctional Institution. The glass partition was thick, scratched by thousands of rings and fingernails. Luca sat on the other side. He looked different. The expensive suits were replaced by a beige jumpsuit. His hair was shorter, the gray at his temples more pronounced, but the tension in his shoulders was gone. He looked lighter. Maya picked up the phone. Luca did the same. You look good, he said, his eyes drinking her in. I walked 20 feet today, Maya said, pride swelling in her chest, without the walker, just the braces. Luca smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. 20 feet, that is a marathon. I am going to walk out of here with you, Maya said. When you get out, I am going to walk you to the car. Luca pressed his hand against the glass. Maya pressed hers against it, their palms aligning perfectly despite the barrier. I used to think freedom was owning the city, Luca said softly. I used to think it was having the power to stop anyone from hurting what was mine. But I was wrong. What is freedom? Maya asked. Freedom is knowing that you can leave, Luca said, his voice thick with emotion. When I said you would never run again. I was terrified you would run away from me, but now I want you to run. Maya, I want you to walk. Run. Sprint. And if running means running away from me, then you should do it. Because I love you enough to want you to be free, even if it is from me. Maya looked at him, her heart full. I am not running away. Luca, I'm just learning to walk so I can keep up with you. The day of his release came 6 months later. The morning was crisp, the air smelling of salt and new beginnings. Luca stepped out of the heavy metal doors of the facility, squinting against the sunlight. He carried nothing but a small duffel bag. He looked down the long concrete path. A car was waiting, but standing next to the car, leaning on a sleek black cane, was a woman. Maya. She stood upright. She wasn't wearing the heavy external braces anymore, just discreet supports under her jeans. She looked strong. She looked whole. Luca stopped. He dropped his bag. Maya lifted her cane and took a step. Then another. Her gait was uneven, a rhythmic, determined limp, but she was moving under her own power. Luca started to rush toward her, his instinct to help kicking in, but he stopped himself 10 feet away. He remembered the promise. He remembered the dignity she had fought for. He waited. He let her choose the distance. Maya closed the gap. The tip of her cane clicked against the pavement. Step, click, step, click. She stopped inches from him. She was breathing hard from the exertion, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining. She dropped the cane. It clattered to the ground. She didn't fall. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down. Luca caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her body flush against his. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in, the scent of rain and resilience. You walked. He whispered into her ear. I told you, she said, pulling back to look at him. Movement is freedom, and I chose to move toward you. She kissed him. It wasn't the desperate kiss of a hospital room or the angry kiss of a penthouse bedroom. It was a slow, deep kiss of certainty. It was a kiss that tasted of the future when they broke apart. Luca bent down and picked up her cane. He handed it to her like a scepter. Ready? He asked. Maya took the cane. She took his hand with her free one. She looked at the street ahead, leading back toward Harborview, not as a kingdom to be ruled, but as a home to be lived in. Ready, she said. They turned and walked down the street together, side by side, not running, not caged, just walking, step by step, into the uncertain, beautiful light of day. Closing message. Thank you so much for listening to this story. She couldn't walk after that night, but the Mafia boss said, now you'll never run again. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Maya and Luca as they navigated through danger, betrayal, and redemption. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment down below sharing your country or city. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please consider subscribing to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. I read every single one. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.